Hi, everyone. This is Ashley.
And this is Kristen.
And this is 1,000 Miles of True Crime. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you were here last week, you know that we covered the John Wayne Gacy case. And today we're going to be digging into some of his victims.
Ooh, this could be a very, brutal and gruesome episode, maybe.
Yeah. You know what? A lot of people don't cover all of them. It's a lot to cover. Obviously, it's 33 victims. And you know what I found was, we had a lot of fun last episode and we were able to kind of joke around on Gacy's expense a bit. But, I've been listening to so much from him and he's just so out there that, I found that I was telling everybody all these like funny things about Gacy and just how ridiculous he is. Like one example is I just saw this thing and he was talking about how like Jeffrey Dahmer is crazy. He's just like, oh, he's like disgusting. It's crazy. And you're like how many
with them, right?
Right. It's like, how many people did you kill? But okay. And so I kept kind of taking this lighthearted approach to it. And it's like, but he really did kill 33 people. And I find that like, there's a few victims that kind of get a lot of, attention. And even I couldn't find stuff on certain victims. And, but I thought it was important to really like dig in and kind of, at least try to understand to some extent some of these victims. And unfortunately, there's still I think it's 5 that have not been identified at all, which is just so sad. But that's what we're going to do today. I'm really sorry, you guys. I hope you have your tissues ready because it's going to be a brutal one. But I do have a fun, I don't know if I'd call it fun, but a correction from last episode. So if you remember, you asked me a question and you said something about, how did his parents know he was in Vegas? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't really know. Maybe he probably called home or something. He was still pretty close with his sisters. And it turns out it wasn't true. So I found this whole thing with his sister. She was doing she was doing an interview and it got brought up. And she said they actually hired a private investigator to hunt him down. So how pissed were they when they like found out he was just in Vegas? Like, I'm sure that makes even more sense why he was calling, like, is it okay if I come home?
I can't imagine. I mean, I think that was why I asked the question, like, did they know where he went? Like, were they concerned? And so I'm glad you were able to find a source that proves that they actually had to pay for a private investigator to find him. So,
yeah. So, okay, let's dig into this current episode. And I will say, if you didn't listen to the first one, I highly recommend it, but you don't need to stop right now. I think this is really, we're going to kind of start off where we left off, but it's really, we're digging into now the actual murders. So, I had mentioned where we'd left off before. Gacy was just going through a divorce. He was starting to go there. So he was trying to still do everything that he possibly could to look important. And he was really, into like politics and he wanted to, become an elected official. So he was able to achieve that. And he was elected as the secretary and treasurer of the Norwood County Street Lights. So important title, I'm sure. But he's not going to let some little title get him down. Like he got business cards made and like he would do everything he possibly could to make it seem like he was some like big wig in the Democratic Party of Chicago. So he was just gonna ride that wave as long as he could. And one of my favorite things that always comes up, do you remember that he even got his picture taken with Rosalind Carter?
Yeah, I remember seeing a couple of pictures with him and other elected officials. Like he was just really someone that was really important. And now I'm sure they're looking back at those photos like, I can't believe we were shaking hands with a serial killer all this time.
Yeah, I'm sure like the first lady didn't remember immediately that she had ever met him or anything, but I'm sure like those pictures started hitting the news and she was like, oh my God, come on. Please.
Not a good look.
Yeah, not a good look. But now you can find him on the internet everywhere. So, but again, he's really doing everything that he can. And, I had mentioned in his last episode that he had killed someone before he had gotten married. So let's get into that. It's January 3rd, 1972. This is his first known victim. Well, victim who he murdered. Timothy Jack McCoy was he was just taking a bus home after a Christmas vacation. And, you know, Gacy ends up bringing the teenager home and he forces him to drink a bunch of alcohol. And then he tells him that we're going to engage in sex acts. And Gacy ends up stabbing him to death in the end. And he doesn't really know what to do. So he just buries the body in the crawl space. And we know for a fact this is the first one that ends up in the crawl space. So, you know, I mentioned the ex-wife was saying like, it smells in here. And, you know, actually his mother-in-law too, that he couldn't stand, like she was telling everybody that they were complaining about the smell. And his wife's like, are there dead rats under there? Something died. And he's like, no, like I said, it's just that there's water down there. And he keeps blaming it on that. And the reason I'm like bringing this all up again and what really stuck out to me was it turns out that the crawl space, like how to access the crawl space, was in the bedroom that her youngest daughter was in. That Carroll's youngest daughter was living there. He knew there's a body under there. And he's got this, you know, this baby practically living in that room. So just disgusting.
That's really sad. Oh.
Right. So it's 1975, and this is going to be when he meets Tony Antucci, and he's 17 years old. He's a wrestler, and Gacy, you know, he knows them, and he shows up at this kid's house at like 10:30 at night. He knows his parents aren't home, and he actually brings his own little projector with him with some stag films. So this is what they call porn at the time. And he's like, hey, do you want to watch some stag films? And Tony's like, okay. And so this is on, and while this is on, you know, Gacy's like, hey, I know you're a wrestler. And he's like trying to wrestle him, and he's egging him on. He's like, come on, big guy. And Tony's like, again, you know, just kind of feels weird, but he starts wrestling with Gacy, and all of a sudden he feels Gacy put handcuffs on him. And so he'd put the one on really tight, and then Tony starts like fighting him and wrestling him, but Gacy does end up getting the cuffs off. So obviously this kid's freaking out a little, and Gacy now has control, and he pulls his Tony's pants down some. And then I'm not sure what he was going to do, but he left the room for a minute. And I think at this point, Tony realizes this is a real issue. I need to get out of here. And thankfully, because he was wrestling him when he was putting on that second cuff, he was able to squeeze his hand out, but it wasn't easy. Like he hurt his hand, but he knew like not to play around. He needed to get his hand out of this cuff. So he gets his hand out of the cuff. And then when John walks back into the room, he does a double leg takedown. I had to look that up, but that's an official wrestling move. And he knocks Gacy to his ass. So, I mean, at this point, Tony's my new hero, and he pins Gacy down on the ground. He puts all of his weight on him, and he actually grabs the key out of Gacy's pocket to unlock the handcuffs. So obviously Gacy's kind of shocked because Tony is able to get the handcuffs on Gacy, and Gacy just looks at him. Again, he's really shocked. And all he can say is, not only are you the only one to ever get the cuffs off, you're the only one to ever put them on me. So
what's freakishly scary to me is that Gacy is at this guy's house. So like, you know, was his intention to like kill him, and then he's in his space or in his domain or whatever?
Wait,
like,
hold on though. It's not his house. I mean, it's his house, but it's his parents' house.
Yeah.
And John knows it. John Wayne Gacy knows like this is his parents' house. So yeah, I don't know what the plan was. And I don't know if they were out of town for the weekend or something. Like, how did he know that they weren't just going to walk in at any moment?
And then even strangers, like, what 17-year-old would want to watch snuff or what did you call it? Snag? What did you call it?
Snag films? No, it's stag films. That's what they called them.
Who would want to watch stag films? Like, why would that be a good idea? Like, I would have been like,
but
maybe you should leave.
That's how he gets a lot of them. Like, I don't get it. And but if remember the JCs, like that's how he was able to increase all the people. And I don't know, maybe was it different when it was like 200 guys in a room? But I think that was like his kind of in, was like, if you were at all interested in it, you know, maybe that was somehow a green light, but also maybe it was harder to get them. Like, you know, kids weren't able to just Google it like they can now. So maybe at 17, you were like, oh, okay. I mean, now telling the story, you know, Tony and Atucci makes it seem like he was like, he didn't want any part of this, but it was horrible. And he just left him there for a minute. Like he just let him cool down. And like he had him handcuffed and he just like, he didn't run or anything. He just let him calm down. And then when he finally calmed down, he like took him out of the handcuffs and told him to leave. And he did. Like Gacy just walks out and he leaves. And luckily he survived and he was able to testify against him years later.
Did Tony tell or report what happened to anyone, or he didn't until after Gacy got found out?
No, yeah, it was, you know, years later. I think he just thought it was like so weird, and he couldn't have thought it was a one-off incident when he makes that creepy comment about like, you're the first one to actually get the handcuffs off. So like, that's why I'm saying like, oh, his first victim, or like, you know, who knows? I feel like this is going on for a long time, and it's just escalating.
I definitely feel as though, and even from just my own personal knowledge of Gacy, I think that there are more than 33 victims that's just my personal opinion.
Absolutely. Like, and he was traveling a lot at points. Like, yeah, I don't fully buy that. I mean, I don't know. It's horrible. So on July 31st, 1975, John Butkovich leaves his family home, and he says that he's just going to go get his last paycheck, that basically the contractor he's been working for, John Wayne Gacy, just owes him a little money. And so he gets there and Gacy's pissed off. He's like, I don't owe you any money. Like, what are you talking about, your last check? And he's like, no way. He really felt like he was trying to like screw him over and get more money out of him. And then nobody knows what happened to him. He just disappears. His mom, Butkovich's mom, actually like goes to Gacy's house and is like, where's my son? Like, I think something's up. And he just told his mom, and then later the cops, that like, he told me he wanted to run away. Like, I don't know where your son is. He told me he wasn't happy and he wanted to run away.
It was such a different time back then. Like, this is the 70s. So like, I think it was a common thing for people to just kind of go off and, you know, not necessarily run away, but like just kind of go live life.
Yeah, I think it was easier to just sort of like, now it would be like living off the grid. Like that was just living in the 70s, you know?
Yeah.
If you're relatively moved to Michigan, you might lose contact with them and you're only a few hours away. So I think I understand how it happens. I also saw reports that there was like 23,000 missing like persons reports right around that time in Chicago too, which is just a lot. I'm sure they were understaffed trying to solve all those. So, but yeah, I mean, honestly, this is like a reoccurring thing that you'll constantly hear throughout this episode. It's like, and then the cops didn't look into it, or the cops just believed Gacy. And this is right around the time that Gacy and Carroll's divorce is officially finalized. And, you know, that's even scarier, right? Like now Gacy's just sort of free to, you know, murder, roam around, bring whoever he wants back. And that's what he's going to do. So then at this point, he runs into Francis Wayne Alexander, and he's 21 or 22. And what I think's most sad about this is that we're not sure exactly how old he is, because he was never reported missing. And he had moved from Chicago to New York, and he was like briefly married. And then right after he gets divorced, nobody ever hears from him again. So just like we were just talking about, his family just sort of assumed he wanted to be alone. Like he would get into contact with us if he wanted to talk to us, and he's not. So they just assumed he just wasn't interested. And so they wouldn't even like figure out, he was never reported missing. Like when they found his body and identified him, that's when they realized he was gone.
I can't imagine that type of disconnect. You know, like no connection whatsoever, or concern of it being that long of not knowing where your child is, your cousin is, your, you know, whatever. That's insane.
It's insane, but I think that's exactly what Gacy was looking for, right? You know, that's how he found his like perfect victims, were people that wouldn't even be noticed if they were missing, essentially. So now let's move on to April 6, 1976. And we have 19-year-old Darrell Sammons, and he disappears. Now, one thing that I found interesting that I found other people weren't really reporting on was that he was a twin. So I'm sure that had to have been really hard. I mean, he had other siblings, but your twin, can you imagine your twin being murdered? And although he's only 18, he had been working for this carpeting company in Libertyville. So Samson had been taken to Gacy's home under pretenses, again, that he's going to get some sort of really good construction job. But then he's brutally murdered. And police were convinced that he was just a runaway, but his mom was like, absolutely not. This is not what happened here. My son did not run away. And I found this in a newspaper. So this is a direct quote from his mom, Dolores Vance. And she said that she called authorities in several states in search of her son. And here in Chicago, I found myself walking the streets at night, just looking for him. I wore blisters on the bottom of my feet, and I burned up 4 cars just trying to find him. Oh, it's heartbreaking.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So as if that's not sad enough, this is like the only one that I actually read the autopsy report for. And like after reading it, I had nightmares, to be honest. And I decided like, I can't do this. I cannot read 33 autopsy reports. Like there's no way. It was just brutal.
Well, I mean, you got to tell me if this is the only one, you got to share now what you.
Okay. So I'll give you like some of the, I won't go into too much, but so they were talking about like the smell. Like they said that the smell of the bones was just putrid, and there was no sign that any animals had attacked the bones. So like no bugs or anything had gotten to him, but they were really moist. Like there was actually water down there. So, you know, these bones were just sitting down there for like 4 or 5 years, and like it was just disgusting. So it's just brutal. And that's like basically how I'm sure all the autopsies were, but I just couldn't go through it. So feel free if anybody wants to read some more, write it and tell us what you found. But yeah, it was brutal. I couldn't. Again, he was only 18. So only 2 weeks later, he's going to pick up 2 more boys, or 2 more boys were reported missing. And one of them, Samuel. So Samuel was only 14. So we're going to find like, that's the youngest that his victims get. And he doesn't go after too many 14-year-olds, but like, it's just tragic. So he was actually hanging out at his sister's house. And the way his mom describes it, he was there eating milk and cookies, and then decided that he was kind of over it. He wanted to head home. And so he is walking home and nobody knows what happened to him. He just went missing. And of course, his mom and his stepdad are freaking out. They report him missing right away. Actually the next day. So they waited that night, and they, you know, they never found him. So one whole day later, another boy goes missing. Randall Raphael was only 15 years old when he went missing on May 14th, 1976. And there's like no information on him, to be honest. I searched. There's nothing. The only thing that we know is that there was a stab wound. So he had, you know, he died from a stab wound, and that they found him in Gacy's house. Next, we're gonna have Michael Bonan, and he was reported missing on June 13th, 1967. And this is around 9 a.m. And he had told his family that he was gonna go to a friend's house and he was gonna help his friend paint. They really don't know what friend, they don't know if this was like a job. Obviously, we're assuming now this may have been Gacy offering him a job to go paint some house. And actually they don't know what happened to him, but the police would get a hold of him because when they first go into Gacy's house, they find his fishing license there. So it's like one of the very first pieces of evidence. So all they knew is that their son's missing. And then they get this call like, hey, years later, we found this fishing license. So, I mean, obviously then you got to watch them pulling all the bodies out. And, I'm pretty sure they knew what was coming.
And so he was reported missing in 1967, but it's really unknown of when he encountered John Wayne Gacy and like met his demise, or like, did that actually happen in 1967?
No, they're like pretty sure it happened on June 3rd. Cause I mean, he like lived with his parents and stuff. He had left saying like, I'm just going to go help a friend paint a house. And then, I'll be back tonight. Like there was no expectation that he was going to be gone. So yeah, but they just didn't hear anything. The cops like, again, are like, what do you want us to do? He probably ran away. And, here John Wayne Gacy had got him. They had no clue. Geez, what are we like 3 in? And this is already getting brutal, you guys. Okay, hang with me. Next, we have William Carroll. So he goes by Billy a lot. And honestly, he's known for getting into trouble. So this is like another one where the cops aren't really going to take it too seriously. And he actually stole a woman's purse like from the subway and got like $200 off of her when he was only 9. So he had to go to a juvenile home for that. And then when he's 11, he got busted with a gun. And like his friends and stuff were saying that like he enjoyed pointing it at people and like trying to scare people with this gun. So like, I don't know. Good thing him and Gacy like didn't team up. Like I don't want to victim blame at all, but he like took it even further. So when he was 16, he was basically a pimp. So he was arranging younger boys, like meeting up with older men, and he was getting paid for it. So we assume that's somehow how he, ended up meeting Gacy and getting intertwined with Gacy. So it was his brother's birthday. So it's June 13th, 1976. And he had promised his dad, like, hey, I'm just going to run out with my friends for like an hour and then I'll be back so that we can celebrate my brother's birthday. And the dad sees him go off. He leaves with a group of teenagers. They think they're his friends. And that's the last time that his family's going to see him. The next victim is still unidentified. So he's a white male, 5'2" to 5'6", and they know he disappeared between June 13th, 1967 and August 6th, 1967, but that's all they know. Yeah, those ones are rough. Okay, so this one really gets to me. So now the next 4 victims all happened within like 2 days, but they're really thinking like within about 36 hours. So I don't know like what the hell was going on August 5th, 1967 in John Wayne Gacy's life, but like I couldn't even imagine. So first off, we have a 16-year-old. His name's Jimmy Hackinson, and he's actually from St. Paul. And he calls his mom because he like hated St. Paul. He wanted to leave. He knew this life wasn't for him there, even at 16. And he had moved to Chicago. So when he gets there, he calls his mom and he says, hey, I made it. I'm safe. I'm fine. I met this guy who's going to hook me up with like a contractor job. And like, I'm going to be fine. And that's the last time anybody heard from him. So Gacy promised him work, and then he used the handcuff trick on him, and he raped him, and then he stabbed him, and he actually wouldn't be identified for another 40 years until, 40 years. In 2017, he had some family come forward and they provided DNA, and that's when they were able to prove it with him.
I think Gacy would have never stopped. He would have never stopped. And with these being so close together, I mean, there's got to be more. I mean, who knows? I don't know if we'll ever know, but it sounds like he was acting on impulse and he just couldn't control himself. So Ugh.
Yeah. And then it's like, I don't know. I think of now like 4 people in that short of span of time. And the next 2 are, again, they're unidentified. Obviously, they're both white males. Let's just be clear from right now. He clearly has a type. There was even, okay, so, you know, they have all these like databases now where you can look at and you can see all of the victims and you can get like kind of a timeline. And there was more than one time I was like, wait a second, like, isn't that Samuel? Like, I would think it was like the boy from earlier kind of thing, because that's how, like, you know, Gacy definitely has a type. So yeah, unfortunately, these next 2 victims are unidentified still to this day. They know one's between 17 and 21, and the other one they believe is a little older, actually, and between the ages of 21 and 27.
Is there any public information that's available about these victims that, you know, people that have missing loved ones could kind of like reach out and say, hey, is it possible that this could be my, you know, my loved one that's been missing? Or like, is that information public? Like, are they putting that out there?
So honestly, no, it's more just like they're giving you like, this is how tall they potentially were. This was their potential age. But I think that now that they've gotten down to this few, it's because they had released information. Like, there was one person they found much later on, and he had this like really distinguished belt buckle. So I think at times they were trying, like, there was somebody with like a really unique tattoo. So they were trying to get that information out there. I think these last victims really just didn't have anything that distinguished on them. It was like white male between the heights of, you know what I mean? And which isn't, to your point, that's not going to make me go, oh my God, I think that's my brother, you know. It's been, you know, how many years, over 40 years. So
what about like familial DNA and all that this whole genealogical stuff that they're doing now, this advanced technology? Can they do anything with the bones to maybe do some familiar tracing or something like that? Or I'm sure they probably thought to do that already.
Yeah, possibly. I do think that they've been able to they've been able to identify some with that, but it's more just when people coming forward and offering up their DNA. So what they did is obviously they buried all the victims, and they kept half of their jaw so that if somebody comes forward, or yeah, I mean, it's sad, but they thought potentially, for example, DNA is going to advance to the point where we can do familial DNA on it and find out potentially who it is.
That is so awful. I hope that they find whoever these last 5 victims that are unidentified. That's just so awful.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, we're still in that like same gap. It's still August 6th, 1967. And Rick Johnston's mom, his mom dropped him off at the Aragon Ballroom because he's going to go to a concert. He's only 17, you know, he needs his mom to take him. And I wish I had more information on how Gacy was able to trick Rick into coming back to his house with him, because, you know, I think Gacy used, a lot of times he would use the like, oh, you know, let me get you a job, like, let me hook you up kind of situation. But I feel like when you're at a concert, like, even if you're offering me double, I'm like, hey, I'm here to have a good time. Like, I'm not going to leave and go try to get a job kind of situation. But he did pretend to be a cop a lot of times. And I could see some 17-year-old at a concert, you know, he's probably drinking or smoking or something. So I don't know if Gacy used one of those tricks to get him back, but I don't know. It just seems hard. I just feel so bad, you know, being the mom dropping her son off. And that's the last time you've seen him.
It's also too, Gacy's had practice with like engaging with kids this age. So, you know, I don't want to say like, it's like he's a pro at this point. He knows the right things to say. Or maybe he's just doing a shot in the dark. Like, maybe this will work, maybe it won't. I can move on to the next one. But it sounds like he kind of, he worked on his craft.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, he was actually employing a bunch of young guys too. So he was constantly surrounded like guys between the ages of 16 and 21. So, I mean, there were some that he kept around. I mean, we're going to see there's some that he actually, you know, took care of as well too. But I think you make a good point that he's just kind of established a way of talking to these people and, pulling them in, and, he knows what he wants and how he's got to get it. So at this point, it kind of takes a little break. And I don't even know if we can call it a break, but he takes like a month off, which at this point is good, which is sad yeah, I know. It's like, it's disgusting to consider that a break, but honestly, 4 in like 36 hours. So we have William George Brady, and he's 19, and he was a really accomplished diver, and he did gymnastics. And he did end up dropping out, and he started working construction. So we, again, believe this is how he got introduced to Gacy, and somehow met him. So in October 1967, Brady left his house telling his family that he was going to go to some party. And his parents noticed that he had left his wallet at home, it was definitely weird, but it's the 70s. It's not like he has a cell phone. They can't just call him. And unfortunately, he never came home that night. So he never had his wallet again. And it was just too much for his parents to take. So they did end up divorcing. And he's another one of these that was not identified for 35 years. It took his siblings coming forward with DNA in 2011. And that's how they identified him. But his parents had already passed away. So they died without ever knowing what happened to their son.
Terrible.
Yeah. And on the 24th of October, so this is John Wayne Gacy is just feeling cocky, like, hey, I'm already really good at this. Why don't I try to kidnap 2 boys? Because one's just not enough anymore. I'm going to go after 2 boys. And Gacy states in court, actually, that this was only one of 2 times that he ever kidnapped 2 boys at once. So they're 2 best friends. It's 14-year-old Michael Marino and 16-year-old Kenneth Parker. And they were both last seen at a restaurant on Clark Street in Diversey Park. And this is an area where Gacy will often pick up boys. So it was just an interesting, it's pretty obvious why he was able to find them. He's already kind of, strolling around on that intersection. Okay, this is the part that I kind of find the most devastating about this story. Both mothers absolutely refused to believe that those were their sons, even after being identified. And they were
in denial, or like, it's been proven that it's 100% their kid?
So yes or no. They were found in the exact same grave, which just kind of goes with the theory that he kidnapped them both at the same time. And so Kenneth Parker, he was identified from a break in his arm. And Michelle Marino, the mom of, Sherry Marino, who's the mom of Michael Marino, recalls that the day her son went missing, so it was a Sunday, and they would always go to the movies on Sunday. So the very last time he saw him, she's like, hey, you're going to be back in time for our movie, right? And he's like, the very last thing he says to her is, of course, Mom, I will see you at 6 o'clock. And the cops then inform her that they think that her son is a victim of John Wayne Gacy. And she's just like convinced that that was not him. And she ends up hiring this private detective, or somehow they are able to get a hold of the DNA. They obtain the DNA. And in 2012, they actually do the DNA testing, and it comes back that she's not the biological mother of the remains. And so now she's like, I don't know who that is. I don't know who's buried in that cemetery, but that's not my son. She actually, the direct quote, so she's 70 now, and the direct quote is, I have no idea where he is, but I believe he is out there. I believe he is not one of the victims. But so she even tries to like go back to court and get the whole body resumed and exhumed, and they're gonna like do the official test. But it basically wasn't approved. Nobody was taking it serious. And an orthodontist who was part of the case and was actually there identifying people said, like, he was very confident that that was her son. And he had used dental records to identify her son. But like, they were all saying, like, there were so many bones everywhere that it wouldn't have been hard for, you know, potentially a limb that's not his kind of situation to be there. So everybody else really believes it's her son, but she's still 100% convinced it's not her son.
I can't even imagine, Ashley, that many bones. And then too, as they're doing their investigation, like things get mixed up or whatever. Like I could totally see that happening, but to be in denial like that, like this is still to this day that she, you know, like she went to her grave believing that that was not her child. Like she's not still alive, is she?
I'm not sure. The last thing I could find from her was like her fighting in court in 2012 and then nothing happening from there. So, I mean, that's still pretty recent. What, that was 10 years ago. I mean, she'd be 80 now then. And the other mom never did interviews and didn't comment, but she also like didn't believe it was her son. So I think possibly too, they were feeding off of each other. I mean, I guess I would probably hold out any hope too, you know, but it's just so tragic. Like you can just hear it in her voice all these years later. Like she's not over it. She hasn't moved on at all. It's like still a very open wound for her.
That's really, really devastating and heartbreaking.
I know. I'm sorry, Kristen. I'm sorry to all of our listeners. Like this one's brutal. Like you guys, this has been like a month of me researching Gacy. Like I need help. Please send help. It's too much.
I do think that it's so crucial and important though, that we identify the victims, because this isn't just a podcast about, oh, this guy, he killed all these people. The people that he murdered are also very important. And their stories deserve to be told. Their names deserve to be known too. So I appreciate this episode, especially that you're diving into who these victims are.
Okay, remember you said that as we move to the next victim. So 17-year-old Greg Godzik was, he actually worked for Gacy, like worked for Gacy. And he heads out on a date one night. It's December 11th, 1976. And his girlfriend says, like, he never showed up. Like, where is he? She's really worried about him. And somehow Gacy had got Greg to come over. And he actually got him to come over before to do some work around the house. And you know what he was doing?
What? He
had him digging holes underneath the crawl space. Like a bunch. Kristen's like giving me the like, please stop. Okay, you're right. We're done. And this, excuse my language, asshole is joking about it on the stand. Like in court, he's like, yeah, Greg didn't know that he was digging his own grave.
He knew all of these victims in some way or another, and he was making them dig their own grave. They're doing the work. So oh my gosh, that is even more diabolical in my opinion.
And like the fact that to Gacy, it's like this big inside joke. Like, and you can tell, like to him, it's like the irony. And
he was joking on the stand, actually like laughing or like, what?
No, let me clarify, because Gacy never laughs. Like, it's so creepy. Like, it's like when you tell a joke and then he doesn't laugh at his own joke. And then you're like, you think that's a joke, right? Like with some of the stuff. And like, yeah, he's just like, yeah, he dug his own grave. Like you could tell he's making a joke, but he doesn't even laugh. It's just the coldest, creepiest thing you've ever heard. And then his poor family's frantic. They're like doing everything they can. Because I think sometimes it's portrayed too that like, oh, all of these were like runaways and nobody cared about any of them. That's not true. There were so many parents and advocates fighting for these people. And the cops just weren't doing anything. And so his parents are frantic. His friends are searching for him. They end up finding his car abandoned, but still nobody knows where he is. And the cops aren't doing anything. So the parents are like, enough's enough. and they hire a private investigator, but the private investigator doesn't get too far either, but everybody they suspect John Wayne Gacy because he was doing work for him. And the girlfriend was so convinced that it was him that she actually not only tells the cops that, she goes to his house and she tries to talk to him. And again, Gacy just says like, no, your boyfriend told me he wanted to run away. Sorry, like maybe it was something you did.
Oh my gosh, what a smug piece of shit.
Yeah. And why wouldn't he be smug? Like he just keeps getting away with it. It's kind of infuriating, but so
it's so confusing that if he was the common denominator, granted, not necessarily for like the 14 and 15-year-old victims, but especially the ones that like were working for him or that, you know, he had extended some job to, how were they not able to catch him sooner? I don't get it.
Like, yeah, how many times do you got to call this guy in for attacking a person? And
then too, from the first episode that you did, the whole sodomy charge, like they have, he's got a history, like, you know.
Yeah, like it wasn't as easy to do a background check, but like if they had just done a background check one of these times, it would have been like,
yeah.
So okay, I'm sorry, where was I? So now we're on to
the girlfriend went to his house.
Okay, yeah, the girlfriend went to his house. He says all that. So let's move on, unfortunately, to the next victim. So John Cizik was 19, and it's January 20th, 1977. So this is the new year, and he's going to become Gacy's next victim. He had recently moved to Chicago, and unfortunately, there's just not much out there about him, but the cops will eventually find that Gacy kept his class ring. So this is one of those times we're starting to, he's starting to keep trophies. But honestly, that's all I have. That's literally all I have. I looked at a lot of different sources. There's just not much on him. So next we have John Prestage, and he was from Kalamazoo. And he had turned 20, so he decided, like, I'm gonna live my best life. I'm gonna go visit my friend in Chicago. And while he's there, he meets this, he calls his family and he's like, oh, I'm having a great time here. And I met this awesome guy who's offered me a really high paying job in construction. He's a contractor and I'm gonna get to, work with him and get a bunch of money. So I'm loving it here. I'm gonna stay in Chicago a little longer. And that's literally the last time they heard from him. They never heard from him again. And right after that, Gacy attacks another boy, and he's between the ages of 17 and 21. But we don't have much more information on that. And then we have Matthew Bowman, and he's from Crystal Lake. So he actually went out to eat with his sister the night before on July 5th, 1977. And he's bragging again. What's this common denominator? He's bragging about this new job that he got, and he's so excited. He's going to get to work with this contractor, and like his life's turning around. And again, doesn't show up. Nobody knows where he is. And his family reported to the police, and they're literally like, they're not even saying he's a runaway. They're just saying like, he's 18. He has the right to disappear basically. And there's nothing that they can do. So again, no investigation. Okay, this one's weird. This is the one I wanted to segue into when you were talking about like all these common denominators, adding back up to John Wayne Gacy. So 18-year-old Robert Gilroy, he was actually the son of a Chicago police sergeant. So if anybody's going to get investigated, it's going to be this one. And Gacy knew that his dad was a cop, because he lived 4 doors down from him.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So he was supposed to go to his horseback riding lesson. And this is on September 15th, 1997. Now, this is what I think is really weird. And I don't know, maybe this was just the 70s, but he was not reported missing for another 12 days. So Robert was actually supposed to go to Maryland, and basically his family just assumed, I don't know, that they didn't see him before he left and that he went to Maryland, and he was supposed to go there for like a horseback riding camp. And then they like noticed he's not calling. They really haven't heard from him. So they finally, after the 12 days, they decide, you know, we better call the camp in Maryland. And when they call, they're like, no, we haven't seen him. He never showed up. And they're like, what? And so then they actually end up calling the local place that he normally goes to. And they find out that he had been no-showing his riding lessons for a few weeks now. So now they're really concerned. And obviously, I mean, he's a cop. So they instantly start, you know, they report it and they start investigating it. And they never came back with anything. They never even tied that one to they like never, I don't know how it never came up. They never like looked into, you know, local sex offenders or anything. So he just completely gets away with it. And again, you know that he was probably getting the best investigation out of all of these boys, but all the leads dry up and the case sort of goes cold.
Wow. So they're just, that's really shocking, because it's a police officer or police sergeant, you said?
Yeah.
Child, and that was it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that makes you feel like, what chance did anyone else have if they couldn't solve that one, if they weren't investigating that one? Well, they did investigate it, but they didn't find anything. So, I mean, he definitely got more than just being told like, oh, he probably ran away.
I'm really curious to know how they were investigating these missing persons cases. Like, what were they doing? What type of work were they doing?
I mean, but I think for the most part, they were just closing the book saying he's a runaway. There was one story where like they kept telling the mom like, oh, I saw your son and he just ran from me. And like, they were just making stuff up to like get moms to stop calling.
Oh my gosh, that is horrible.
Yeah. So now we got John Maury, and he had just returned back from the Marines. So he moved back to Chicago. He got an apartment and he went to visit his family one night. And as he was leaving, all he said was like, you know what, I'm actually going to go out tonight. I'm going to have some fun. And so this is September 25th, 1977. And just to add another tragic level to this poor family, 6 years before this happened, his sister Judith Maury was, she was only 21, and she was a clerk, typist for the Cook County, for the county assessor's office. Mm-hmm. Not really sure what that is, but I'm sure someone does. But she was found stabbed in her apartment, and her apartment was just like covered in blood stains, and they don't know what happened either. So now, I mean, can you imagine this family? Now 2 of your kids are murdered.
Horrible.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start. I just couldn't imagine. And so I hate to just keep moving on to the next, but let's move on to the next. The last call Russell Nelson made was to his mom, and this was on October 17th, 1977, and it was to wish her a happy birthday. He had moved to Chicago with a friend to do some contractor work because they had heard about this guy, again, who could hook him up, get him a great job. They could be making a lot of money. It's the last time they heard from him. Then we got...
The last call you receive is from your kid wishing you a happy birthday.
Can you imagine? And like this, it's not the worst part, but again, it's not like, I find like, it's not that they're like calling it their worst possible moment, right? Like they're all excited. Like they're like, I just got this new job. I'm gonna be making all this money. Like I have this new opportunity in life. Like they feel like they're really, you know, kind of making it. They're young. So, I mean, it's even more kind of impactful, you know, when you get your first like big girl job and you're like making real money and you're like proud of yourself. And then like nobody ever hears from them again. It's just tragic. So Robert Winch was 18 and he had ran away from a couple foster homes actually. So he was from Michigan. I want to say he was from Kalamazoo too. And he, you know, obviously probably had a pretty rough life already being in like the foster care system. So, you know, he runs away to Chicago and it's believed that he ends up meeting up with Gacy and Gacy tells him, probably offers him a job too, but tells him like, come live with me for a while. You can come stay with me. I'm divorced. Like Gacy admits that he had said that to some people like, oh, I'm just recently divorced. I have this house all to myself. Like, you know, you can feel free to come use the room. But again, nobody ever hears from him again. So a month later, on November 18th, 1977, 20-year-old Tommy Bowling went missing. And a lot of people didn't take his missing seriously either, because like even his family admits he was using a lot of drugs at the time. But what I think is a little different about him, so he was actually married and he had a 3-year-old son. So, you know, it's just, it's sad. And he took a father away. Then there's not a lot of information on David Tulsam, and he was last seen on December 9th, 1977. But the one thing that like was creepy and just kind of stuck out to me. So he was 20 when he went missing. And when they actually found him and they identified his body, it was on his 21st birthday. Yeah, not the way you want to spend your 21st birthday.
This is sad. My heart is breaking like every second.
I know. I keep checking my outline. I'm like, how much more do we have? I can't do much more. Okay, bear with me, everyone. We just have a few more. And it's 1977. It's almost over, but the year's almost over. But Gacy thinks like, what's one more? So he abducts a 19-year-old named Robert Donnelly from a bus stop. So again, this is something he's kind of known for. He's picked up a few kids from bus stops. And Gacy pretends to be a cop again. And so he handcuffs Robert and makes him like duck down in the car. And then he then takes him home, and his accounts of what it was a traumatizing night. It was a traumatizing night. Gacy forced him to drink a bunch of alcohol, like forced him, like more than anyone should consume. And so he's kind of like blacking out. And then he takes him into the living room. He pulls down his pants and then he rapes him. And as if that's not horrific enough, then he starts strangling him. And he was like strangling him until he would black out. And then he would like ease off of him and let him come back to life. And he kept just doing it over and over again. And so then when he got bored with that, he takes him into the bathroom and he fills up the bathtub, and he's doing the same thing. He's, basically dunking him under the water until he blacked out. Then he pulls him back up and lets him come back to, and then he would, do the same thing over. And this went on for hours and hours. And the whole time he's just like, he keeps sexually assaulting him, and he just keeps going over and over again. And so then all of a sudden he just goes ahead and he puts Robert in the car and decides that he's just going to drop him off. And he tells him, but like, go ahead and try to report me, because no one's ever going to believe you. So what does Robert do? He immediately goes and reports him to the cops. So, and he knows, he's like, John Wayne Gacy, you have to go talk to this guy. And so they go and they talk to John, and he's like, what? Oh, Robert, I remember him. Like, that was consensual. Like, he told me he liked it rough. And I don't know if it was just because like the cops are like, oh, like gay people, like it must be consensual. Like, it's horrible to say, but like, that's how people thought back then. And they like couldn't even imagine that this was rape, even though it clearly was. And then they sort of look at it, and John's like, this pillar of the community. And here's this young guy, he's like, 19, and he he had some like marijuana charges. So they were like, Gacy's a much better witness. And he says that, this was just like a lover's quarrel. So they had arrested Gacy even. He had like gotten arrested, but he ended up not getting charged. And
did they not smell the smell and odor coming from his house? I mean, I get like if you're in the house, but you would have to get a whiff of it, is my guess. Or you could smell it outside. I mean, they
might not, to be honest, like I don't even know if they searched his house, because they really didn't. It seems like they just didn't believe it, right? Like they just thought like, oh, they got into a fight. And that's what Gacy was trying to make it seem like too, like, oh, I'm the victim here. Like, I thought we were just going to have a good time. And then he realized that I'm a little older, I'm more well-established. And like, he was trying to get more money out of me. Like he would always kind of paint this picture, like, I'm the victim. I thought we were in love kind of thing. And like, it's just horrible. And they just believe him. And I think it's just easier than trying to, prosecute him, because again, he comes across at least as being like this pillar of the community and like
reputable.
Yeah. And I think at the time people were probably like, he's running his own construction company and all this stuff. Like there's no way he could be this horrible rapist.
Is this all Norwich police that are investigating this, or are there other jurisdictions too?
No, well, Norwich is technically Chicago.
Okay. So
it's Chicago police, but then some kids will be reported missing in Des Plaines. So it's all over the place. He spends a lot of time in Boys Town. So he's kind of in different areas. I mean, but pretty much in like, like the north side of Chicago or the northern suburbs.
John, he plotted this shit out. He had to have, like, he knew what to say. To police when they would come around. He would have his story together. He knew, like, he was calculated.
Yeah. Yes. And we'll get into all the ways he treated the cops and stuff. But yeah, like cops would have to remind themselves that he's a bad guy. Yeah. So then we have William Kinder, and he was another one who's supposed to go see his girlfriend, Mary Jo, and he just doesn't show up. And it's been a couple of months since Gacy's actually attacked anyone, at least that we know of, at this point, right. At least that we know of.
You always have to throw that in there because,
yeah,
we'll never know.
You think about it, like how many guys didn't come forward? Because at this point now he's randomly letting people go, which is sort of strange. And I don't know why he decided to do that. I don't know if he was doing that a lot when he thought he could get away with it and people really just weren't reporting him, or is he just getting ballsy and he thinks like, I'm on top of the world?
I think that he was getting ballsy and he was like, I'm untouchable and I dare someone to make an accusation. I've already, been approached by law enforcement or whatever. I dare you to do something. So I feel like that was probably egging him on even more, which is sick, but
it's very sick. So let's see. So it's February 16th, 1978. And right away, Mary Jo's like, I know Gacy. He had actually invited him to a party on the night he got arrested. So she really suspected him because I guess he was talking to William a lot. And so for whatever reason, she kind of like instantly went to like, we need to check him out. And she told the cops again, she said, I'm really suspicious of him. And they actually even got reports that the last time anybody saw him, Gacy was actually picking him up on Diversity Parkway again. So he's right in that area where he's always picking, these boys up from, but the cops don't do anything. So it's June 30th. Gacy goes to one of his favorite gay bars and he ends up meeting 20-year-old Timothy O'Rourke, and he takes him home and he rapes and he tortures him. But, oh no, what does he do? there's no more room in the crawl space. He can't bury him at home anymore. And this is when he starts dumping people, and he's just dumping them in the Des Plaines River at this point. So again, I don't know if he's just getting so ballsy that he's like, I'm just going to throw him in my car and leave, or what. I do think he probably genuinely ran out of space. He completely ran out of space to bury him. And he later on in different accounts, he'll say that he like considered putting him up in the attic and things like that, but he just knew he was, he's running out of places to put him. So he just dumps him in the Des Plaines River. And next they're going to find a naked body again in the Des Plaines River. And it's of a 19-year-old Frank Lanigan. And they realized that he has these bikini briefs stuffed down his throat. Like they're lodged down so much that he suffocated on them. And they were able to prove that he didn't drown, that he was clearly suffocated by these underwear.
Oh my gosh, Ashley, that is horrifying. He suffocated because of underwear being pushed so far down his throat. That is how he died.
Yeah.
Along with also being tortured by Gacy.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he was being tortured. But yeah, that was like the final straw. That was what the the medical examiner said finally did him in, unfortunately. And Gacy never admitted to him, but they found his personal items at Gacy's house when they finally would search his house. So that's how they were able to tie that body back to him.
What would make him think that he could actually say that he didn't do something? Like he had already admitted to all these other ones, and there was evidence of their belongings in his possession. What would make him think that anyone was going to believe him if he said, no, I didn't do that, guy. That wasn't me. Like, at this point, I mean, you got all these guys under your house. So just because this guy's in the river, you got his belongings at your house. Who knows his underwear is shoved down his throat? I mean, he wasn't even claiming that victim.
No, but we'll see with Gacy that he goes back and forth between like just full out bragging about torturing and killing these boys to flat out denying it and claiming like, how could I have gotten them under the crawl space? Like, I'm a big guy and I had back problems. So he goes back and forth. Like, he is all over the place. So on November 23rd, 1978, John Wayne Gacy would murder his next to last victim. So this isn't his very last victim, but this is the next to last. And he would admit to him, he says, oh yeah, I dumped a boy named Mojo in the Des Plaines River. And Mojo was the nickname of an Elmwood Park boy. He was 20 years old and his real name was James Mazzara. And I hate to do this, but it is just getting so late. I'm sure this episode is so long and we've been through so much. I am actually going to end it there because the final and last victim is Robert Peast. And honestly, he's the one who gets like all the attention. Everybody always talks about him because he's basically the one that his family was able to take down Gacy. So I absolutely did not want to do a 3-parter, but there's just still so much to go through. So you guys, thank you so much for bearing this out with us. This was, I think, at least for me, the most brutal episode we've done so far. But yeah, next episode, we're going to really get to dig into how they busted him and the trial. And there's a lot of good stuff from his lawyer. I don't want to say good stuff, and I don't want to downplay this at all, especially after how horrible this episode is, but bear with us, guys. And we will have the next or the 3rd episode. And I swear that'll be the final episode because I do not want to talk about John Wayne Gacy anymore, but we'll have that as our next episode.
Well, again, Ashley, thank you for going into detail over who these victims were, that they had names, they had families, those of them that, we do know about. And I hope that these other unidentified 5 victims are soon identified. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.